Transportation Committee meeting to order. May I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Moved. Second, and call a question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. The next meeting on September 21st, same time, the council chamber. Is there any addition to the? You can hear me? Oh, you can hear me.
Turn on Councilor Olsen.
Okay. Is it good now? Can you hear me now?
It's a little better, but not very well.
Okay, so what's the problem? What's the problem? Okay. So let's go on and see how it works. So is there any addition to the agenda? Seeing none. So let's go to item number 1. Clapton Canada Line Station status update. So Donna, anything to?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Michael?
Hello, yes, I can hear you, Councillor Al, but when you first started speaking at the beginning of the meeting, it lasted like 2 seconds, but now it's gone quiet. So it seems like it's just the way the microphones get set up. Someone pushes a button and then it might come back in. I think something needs to be adjusted on your end, but we can hear going forward. Anyhow, I don't have any. On this item, I have a couple questions and a few comments. First off, I'd like to know, in the report it mentions the relationship and communication that the city has been having with TransLink. It mentions it on page 14, and we had a discussion last night about Steveston Community Center, and I just thought when we have discussions about the Capstan Canada Line station, is that the same kind of meeting where the city is directing need for discussion around Steveston as we're making big decisions around adjacent developments? In this report, it says around Capstan for the adjacent developments and the staging areas, TransLink is in talks with the city. So I guess my question is, do these talks extend to all areas around transit hubs?
I can take a crack at that, Mr. Chair. Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. The discussions around the Capstan station are specifically about Capstan and the construction of that station. That station is an existing project. It's a large project with a lot of moving parts. So the meetings that we have with them on Capstan are directly about Capstan station and constructing it. They don't include development of other transit hubs throughout the city.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. It was evident from our discussion last night that there's more discussion needed in Steveston. My next question relates to really positive news in the report, where it mentions that with the city's advocacy work, convincing the project to include dual escalators and extended platforms for 3-car trains. I think those are really positive things to hear. My question, will that make this the only station that can accommodate the 3-car trains, or will this follow in line with the other stations?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, our understanding is that there may be some stations along the Canada Line that can accommodate 3-car trains, but not all of them.
Okay, thank you. And my final question, through the chair to staff on this one. In the report, it mentions that the potential completion date would be March 2023. Just a question: does this? We might not have the planning staff here that would know on it, but I know we have a new community center, the North City Center Community Center. I can't remember the full name, but it was delayed opening. Will that match closely with March 2023? That the new community center and this Capstan station open around the same time?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I don't have the answer to that. There may be staff on this video conference that may be able to answer, perhaps someone from Parks.
Through the chair, I'm happy to answer that question. Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, in terms of the city center, community center, it was envisioned that that facility would be completed December of 2023. That was based on a start of construction that would have already transpired. To date, council has not yet issued the development permit for that project. So we would be looking early 2024, most likely at this point in time.
Great. I appreciate you being here and all the staff responses there. Thanks.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions, just following on Councillor Wolf's comment. Will this station will be built for the future? In the report, it will be the expanded version. Is that not correct for the record?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes.
The second question I have, since we've already advanced TransLink, what was it, $4 to $5 million for all the plans and what have you, are we on schedule to continue to advance that money?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, we've provided TransLink with all of the funds that were obligated in our contract with them. And in addition, we provided $3 million for the extended platform and the dual escalators.
So, in essence, the city has given their contribution. I'm assuming the whole 26 million or whatever. My question is, and probably Mr. Craig will have to answer, are we continuing to assess development within the number 3 road corridor that we're in the Capstan Station area for the assessment? Will we continue to assess as buildings come on board, which will put more money into our coffers for transportation?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes. Those funds can be used for all transportation or transit improvements in the vicinity.
How much do we have in the fund now? Because I understand before COVID, we had more than what was required to pay for the station as it was prescribed. Is that not correct?
I don't know the exact number, but we have provided TransLink with $34 million, and the last I recall seeing was approximately $34 million.
So if the station costs $36 million, TransLink will fund the difference.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes, we fulfilled our contractual obligation.
I feel TransLink is very lucky to get that kind of money. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Andy?
Thank you, through the chair. First of all, I think a compliment is in order just for the foresight in the funding arrangement that was made to fund this station some years ago. That I think was quite good. But in terms of one aspect of this report, and that's the delay, I see that there's a construction delay of 3 months, which I guess can happen. But on page 14, it talks about changes in procurement and delivery processes. And that's a little vague to me, and it doesn't seem to quantify anything in terms of months, although it does give a completion date. But it doesn't really explain what it is exactly that's causing that delay. And the other thing I wonder about is when you make an agreement with people, often they will pay a penalty if they don't deliver on time. So I realize we're dealing with TransLink, so that's a bit of a funny rhetorical question if they're going to pay us a penalty for not completing on time. But what is happening with that procurement and delivery process issue? Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, the TransLink has indicated that instead of the design build process, which means a single contract that was originally contemplated, they're going with a traditional design bid build process where a contractor for the design is hired separately from the construction contractor, thus adding 6 months to the process. And there is, in our contract with TransLink, there is no penalty for schedule delay.
Okay, good. So, Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Well, thank you for the report and the update. Now, on our page 14 and 15 under the construction activity impacts, so there's going to be, when construction does start, there's going to be some impacts to traffic and, vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic, as well as bus traffic. So can you talk a little bit about the communication plan? I mean, I'm sure TransLink is going to have one. Or are we going to be working with them? Or is it going to be one message? Or are we going to be going out on our own? Or thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, TransLink is currently working on their public engagement plan. They have contacted our city corporate communications staff recently and are working together. I don't have details to share with you at this moment, but they are working on it together.
So I guess as construction is confirmed and we get closer to the date, we'll have an idea of what that looks like, because this is a really congested area, a heavy traffic area, and I can just imagine there could be some frustration. So anything that we can do, I think, to get it out, the usual social media channels and perhaps in the paper. And anyways, all right, great. Thanks very much.
Yes, well, actually, I share the concern of Councillor McPhail. The impact of the construction on the traffic in that area, and also the arrangements to mitigate the impact. So I think we need to keep an eye on that and monitor the situation. And most likely, we need to inform the public as early as possible so that they can plan for any other routes to go. So I think that is something that we have to be very, very careful about. Okay, with that, there's a motion recommendation. So move and second it. So I call a question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Moving on to number 2, Fundy Drive traffic calming update. Celine, anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer questions.
Alexa?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you to staff for this. You mentioned that a majority of the neighborhood was in support of this. Was anyone vehemently against any of it?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes, there is less than 6% of the total number of residents surveyed that indicated non-support of the proposed traffic calming measures. The key reason is they don't see the need for any traffic calming measures.
Okay, all right. But I think in general, from the vast majority of the people in the neighborhood, certainly we had heard from, a number of us councillors had heard from them directly. And thank you for doing this and for finding some solutions for the whole neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, good. Michael?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair, just a few questions on this one. Through you to staff. I guess I'll start with related to the people who are opposed to it, as well as the 42% of people who didn't reply. So we don't know how they're going to react. I was just questioning the full rollout, by going through all the elements of the traffic calming all at once instead of incremental or after hearing a bit more from the other 42% of residents who will be impacted by this. One of my bigger concerns is hearing from people in all different parts of Richmond on parking restrictions. And I guess my question related to that item on page 20 in our report, it says that it's going to be prohibit on-street parking along the curved sections of Fundy Drive adjacent to the park. And it also says in the report that the principal was contacted or was aware of this as this was going on. I don't know. I've never seen what the drop-off or pickup looks like for kids at the school. But I'm sure staff has been there to scope out both those times of day. My question about the parking restrictions, is it 24 hours a day in those areas, or can parking still happen overnight? Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the parking restriction is proposed to be 24/7.
Okay, and then to follow up on that, through the chair, there was no adamant opposition from the public on that aspect. It didn't mention in the report anything specific to the parking restriction.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the response that we got back from the survey, there was no indication of the opposition for the parking restriction.
Okay. My final question, I know this area got kind of handpicked to be surveyed under a pretty strenuous program here, and you can see the result of that work and what the data showed is necessary. My question is, how many other roads in Richmond are in need of this kind of scrutiny to look at improving safety and road access or crosswalk access and that kind of thing? Are we talking all of areas, like 50, 100 other roads could potentially go through this level of scrutiny and then need this amount of projects? Are we talking not that many left in the city?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we do this for neighborhoods that express based on requests. And right now we are up to date. There's a couple of neighborhoods that we are working on right now.
Okay, great. Keep us informed of what you need to get that done. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Andy?
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, it's a controversial topic, traffic and traffic safety in every neighborhood, but just a couple of quick questions and a comment. One, the speed average I noted was, I think, 33 and 36, and that was, I think, in April. So on the one hand, it doesn't seem excessively high, but was that a 24-hour a day average, or was that, obviously it wasn't over a week because I think it was fewer days, but was it over 24 hours, or was that during the daytime, those averages?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, the counts were done over between in April of 2021, between April 8th and 20th. In terms of the average speed, they were done over 24 hours.
Okay. All right. And the issue of the speed humps, more or less a comment, but also a question. I trust that there are specifications that the city uses when constructing speed humps. Just a comment I'll make is when I drive through Richmond at different locations, I've noticed, I'll say, a disparity between the height, the width, the depth, if you want to call it that. And I'll just make a comment that if the posted speed is going to be 30 or if it's 50 in a different area, and I think it's very important that the speed humps are constructed to specifications that allow vehicles, including all kinds of vehicles, it could be a truck, it could be a sports car, it could be a family van, but they have to be able to transit over the speed humps very comfortably at the posted speed limit or below. And sometimes my observation has been that some of the speed humps, and maybe they were constructed before there were specifications, but some of them are constructed in a way that is very disruptive to the flow of traffic. And actually, if it's too disruptive, it can cause a safety issue in itself. And I realize you all know this, so maybe if somebody had those specifications, I wouldn't mind just kind of glancing at them. Anyway, and well, I guess that is a question in a way. There are specifications for speed humps to do with residential roads and the posted speed. Obviously, they should be different depending on the speed limit, or they could be.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, yes, there are different design criteria taken into consideration when it comes to speed humps, based on road geometry, based on speed limits. What I can say is that in terms of comfort level, it's a very subjective thing, but the humps will be designed and built to the industry standards.
Okay. Thank you. And then I'll just make one comment. I mean, this road is one I've driven on many times, as I'm sure all of us have. And it is a bit of a tricky road. It is a bit unique. Not every subdivision has this kind of setup where you have a school and a park on such a pronounced curve. So when you do have cars parked on both sides, there can be visual distractions and there can be obstructed views. So I kind of agree to an extent with the comment Councillor Wolf made about the inquiry into the 24-hour parking issue. But the obstruction and the lack of visibility on that curve with two cars parked on each side, especially depending on weather conditions, can be a real factor. So in this case, it might be a reasonable step. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I have a question on PWT 21, talking about the timeline. Staff mentioned that it could be substantially completed before the start of school year in September. So how confident is staff on the completion of the project?
Through the chair, staff are in discussion with the construction crews to get the construction going. We believe that the signage as well as all the pavement markings will be completed before then, and we are fairly certain that the majority of the civil work will be done as well.
Okay, yeah, because we're talking about 6 weeks from now, right?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. So there's a staff recommendation. Do I have a mover? Move.
Move.
Second, I call the question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Moving forward, item number 3, Lower Mainland Flood Management Strategy Communication Plan. Mr. Ho, anything to add to the report?
Mr. Chair, I have nothing to add to the report.
Any questions? Michael?
Yeah, thank you to the chair, to staff. I could ask it on this item or the next one, but I'll split it. I guess my question, I've read a little bit recently on this new moon wobble effect for low-lying areas. I'm not sure if staff read into that. Has that made any adjustments to our strategy going forward?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yeah, the lunar precession effect is on an 18-year cycle, and it's been happening since the beginning of time, so it's really nothing new. The risk caused by this effect is relatively small compared to the other risks that the city plans for, such as freshet, storm surge, and sea level rise. In our dike standards, we also have a 0.6 meter freeboard as a factor of safety for scenarios like these. And as we continue to upgrade our dikes, that freeboard will continue to be built in for that additional layer of protection for the city.
Great, thank you. And then just one final follow-up related in the report. I really like the quote saying that we want to advance on advocating for Richmond's position on regional flood protection management. I guess my question to staff on with that note, I know we're clearly targeting provincial and federal governments, but industry isn't named so much in the communications plan. I know they're part of the one that group that's assembled by Fraser Basin Council. There were some industry representatives on there. But is there any further comments, or I know we're addressing the letters that staff's recommending here to federal and provincial minister-related people. But what about industry? Should we be including CEOs of companies, of some of the land owners along our shores? Should they be included in this letter campaign?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, certainly if there's any industry members that are part of these committees or organizations, we'll certainly reach out to them to communicate the same thing as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, Andy?
Thank you, through the chair. Well, just a general comment. First of all, I mean, this is a fascinating report. You did a lot of information in it, and you know, I'm sure many members of the public would actually be interested in looking at it in some kind of condensed version, just in terms of some of the steps. But I don't know if I can think of something more important to Richmond than flood protection and the dikes and what we're dealing with here. So I did notice that, like some of the information, I was not aware that the tree trap, for instance, between Hope and Agassiz capturing 70% of the debris. I mean, that's pretty important. But a question for you is regarding the drainage. It was up 40% due to the rainfall. And if I look at the graph on page, I think it might be page 39, it looks like although the city was able to handle it, that's one question, the city was able to handle it, you state that. But it looks to me like on the graph that it was near capacity though. Am I reading that graph right on 39 that we were close to, well, it looks like we were somewhere around the 95% capacity. And I know some of the older pumps were really tapped out, but overall though, were we that close to being at capacity with that?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, this is actually the next item, but this graph is showing how we, all the work we've done with upgrading our pump stations and increasing the capacity of those pumps to date. So the vertical axis is not a percentage. It's actually showing the units of volume that can be pumped out at a certain rate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Then the question would be, just as an estimate then, in terms of percentage of our capacity to pump, how were we this year?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, overall the system performed very well, despite the number of significant rainfall events. There are a number of stations that are getting close to capacity, so as part of the capital planning process, we'll bring forward any projects that are of concern for Council's consideration.
Okay, I mean, that's important. Just a couple other comments, and I mean, I was impressed as well with, again, how we've leveraged senior levels of government for funding, so that's important, and sure we'll keep doing that. And the last question I had was the mention of the leakage in the seawall at Britannia, which is relatively new and I think relatively high-tech. Is that something that is covered in any kind of warranty with the construction of it, or is that just on us? And that's to be expected, I guess. I realized it was a caulking issue and some sealant, so just something to be expected, or was that covered?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, it is past the warranty period. However, the seepage was relatively minor. We were able to address the issue and have completed the repairs to grouting.
Okay, and just general observation, that well seems to be working fairly well when I'm there with some high tides, king tides, and when the gate's in at the access points. So, seem to be a worthwhile project. So, thank you.
Yeah, Andy, you're ahead of us, but anyway, they're related. So, Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff, well, thank you for the report, and I think it's a good strategy that we're undertaking. Now, with regards to the information that you're sending with the letters, can you give an example of what you're, like it says, communicate Richmond's position or provide them with an understanding and awareness of Richmond's position. So, for example, are you sending copies of our dike strategy? So what are the kind of background documents that you're sending out, just out of personal interest?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, these letters that we will be sending out would be reflective of the council-endorsed direction that we received. So that includes mainly 3 points. One is that the governance and evaluation of flood protection projects and diking be kept at the local government level. Two is that dedicated funding be set up and preserved at the provincial and federal levels so that we can access them for our projects. And three, that the senior government levels require local government authorities to have flood protection strategies and plans developed to mitigate against climate change and sea level rise.
All right, thank you.
Carol?
Thank you very much. Through the chair to staff, I just wanted to congratulate you. I mean, Richmond is leading the way on dike protection, and I was very surprised to read, though, that the reason we're meeting with the MLAs and the MP is because there is no regional flood protection plan. I find that amazing. I mean, obviously, we're doing a good job and we should be able to avoid flooding, but our neighboring communities are probably not. Has there ever been a regional protection plan, or is this something new that we're just recognizing now?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the Fraser Basin Council has been trying to develop a lower mainland flood management strategy for quite a while now, actually, the new proposed governance and funding structure is kind of coming out of that strategy, which is something that we're trying to address at the local level.
Great work. Thank you.
Okay. So there's a staff recommendation to endorse the report and also let this be sent to the various people and organizations. So do I have a mover? Move. Second. Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving onward to related item, Fraser River Freshnet and Flood Protection Update 2021. So Mr. Ho, any update? I mean, any new comments?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Michael?
Thank you very much through the chair to staff. Just a few question areas here. I read this report with great delight. I like stats and I like the river. So it kind of came together here. I really enjoyed hearing about some of the highlights in Hamilton, actually, hitting two of the major records. Just a little bit of clarification on the use of terms in the report. It mentions Hamilton, or it mentions a few different areas having return periods. So just to clarify, a 10-year return period or a 100-year return period, those would be like a 10-year storm, something you'd expect every 10 years, or a 100-year event, meaning, is that what your return period is referring to?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, basically, yes. They are kind of to indicate the probability of those storm events happening in a certain year. So a 10-year return period event is about a 10% chance of it happening in any given year.
Great. Yeah, I'll be sharing with the Hamilton Community Advisory Association tomorrow. Related to that, you mentioned in the report that the Fraser River debris trap, it's an infrastructure, that it diverts 70% of large woody debris coming in the Fraser River, and this is around Agassiz and Hope where this is working. So 30% goes past. Is there any other means to catch that's a provincial-led initiative? Like, I see a lot of boats going upriver and the odd one hauling a single lone log that's floated off. That could be a hazard for our dikes or for boats traveling. So beyond the Fraser River debris trap, is there any other provincial organization or method to control? And also correct me if I'm wrong. The 30% that gets passed, that's the other concern. We're not talking about 70% of the debris is above the trap and 30% of the debris falls in the river below the trap. Because I think of many areas around Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Surrey, where there is trees along the shoreline and they do fall in the river. So you can clarify if that's an issue as well, or is that not really considered an issue that we need provincial support for?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'm not aware of any other kind of means that the province has to collect or trap the debris. We do very regular dike maintenance and monitoring, particularly during times of high stream flow, to try to catch areas that might have debris issues and try to address those in a timely manner.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Through the chair to staff, just a couple more areas here. The next one's on page 32. I just questioned one of the words here, or the names of a road that I don't think exists. So on our page 32, there's 4 bullet points of projects that are going to be current dike improvement projects. And the 4th of the bullets mentions the South Dike upgrade between Graybar Road and Queens Road. And I've frequently walked this area or cycle this area, and there is no Queens Road. I know there's a Queens Trail that runs from the north arm straight south to the south arm, but there's no road there. So my question is this upgrade that we're talking about here involve putting a road in there?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no, we're not developing a new road. It's a really minor road that's actually not identified, but it is called Queens Road.
Okay, great, thank you. Just wanted to clarify it because that would have been a much larger project. Do you know if that specific area, there's that board mentioned there, that's the only one that's an actual trail, part of it is a trail for the public to use, and part of it is Fraserwood Way. Is that going to remain exclusively a trail use, or does this upgrade turn that into a road?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, any areas where there's an existing trail, we would be looking at maintaining that access through any upgrade projects.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question relates to on page 34. At the top there, you mentioned that there's been significant erosion and undermining of the North Dike between Nelson Road and the train trestle. And further along, you mentioned that the federal and provincial permits have not yet been received, so we can't do the work yet. Do we have any timeline for when we expect to get those permits? Are we being aggressive enough to remind them that we need them?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, we have been in close contact with the permitting authorities trying to push this along. We realize they have been a bit slow, but we're trying to help do anything we can to expedite this as much as possible.
Great, I appreciate your work on that. And finally, through the chair to staff, my last question. In the kind of on page 35, it talks about the year delay we've had on collecting new utility rates for drainage and diking. Council had voted to push it to 2023. My question is, we also had a few months ago a report to us on categories. I forgot the specific names staff used, but categories for different rate classes. And there was a lot of breakdown for different industrial classes and the amount of funding they would be providing for drainage and diking. But there really wasn't a lot of breakdown for residential or agriculture. There was really like one for all properties in Richmond, residential, regardless of having agricultural or not. Just a long-term question: will staff be bringing potential changes to the other categories beyond the industrial that we recently approved?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, one of the categories that we'll be taking a deeper dive into is the farm properties, just because there's such a wide variation of the different types of uses, the size, and what's located on those properties. So that's one of the areas that we'll be reviewing further.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, good. Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Well, thank you for the report. I just have a question on our page 31 under the drainage system performance and, the number of service requests that we had. And, of course, they happen when there's heavy rainfall events. And just wondering how staff was able to manage, because I'm sure it's an intense period of rain and then all these service calls come in, and just wondering about the pressure it puts on, public works staff getting out to these calls.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I think staff managed it very well. The issues that typically get surfaced in these events are usually fairly minor, things like clogged drainage basins and things like that. So we were able to deal with those pretty quickly and in a timely manner.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks to the staff. I know that we had a couple of emails, over, I think, last year from residents thanking city work quickly and handling the issues so professionally. So please pass that along. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
So moved.
Moved, secondly, call the question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Item number 5, 2020 annual water quality report. Anything to add to the report? Any questions? Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, just a couple questions here. First one is about on page 42. It mentions the water fountains that we have, 36 of them. Are any of them recently added this year, and are there any more coming this summer? I know we've had a number of letters in local paper about the cities needing to respond to these heat waves and conditions that we're facing with the current climate that we're under. And so I'm just wondering, are there responses to bringing more water fountains online?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, there was a request this year for a new fountain. Staff are looking at it currently, and I believe any of the oncoming parks may, or any of the trails may also include a water fountain.
Great. Then just to follow up on that through the chair, just to ensure that when we can expedite that, maybe that being like a first feature of a park, when we can put kind of priority on aspects of a park, get that out there and let the public know, especially with an item coming up next on the agenda, single-use plastics. Sooner we get water fountains available and the network set, and more people switching their habits, the sooner we get that. My next question, or final question on this item, through the chair, is it mentions that it's on average, I think, $100,000 damage from a leak. Where's it mentioned here? His name. All right, maybe it was. Oh yeah, at the top of that. Middle, just above the middle on page 42. It says a single water main break can amount to $100,000 damage. My question, I think it was probably not in that calendar year. I think it was in spring of this year or late winter. Beside Lansdowne Mall, there was on Alderbridge Way, there was a leak. I'm just curious, what did that break the peak? Did that cause more damage? I'm trying to put what does the water main damage look like that actually gets close to hitting $100,000 damage?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the water fire hydrant that broke at Lansdowne was just hit by a motor vehicle. So that was just shutting off the water infrastructure for a short period of time and then replacing the fire hydrant. One of the larger scale leaks that involves concrete restoration, blacktop, any trees that may be damaged, any of the houses that experience flooding. Those are the ones that amount to $100,000.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate that.
Alexa?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for this report. Just out of curiosity, it says that we have high quality tap water. How does it compare to bottled water? Is it equivalent, better, worse?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, within our water quality parameters, our tap water is
okay, thank you. How can we let the public know? Because I know that there's lots of people who still, they're in Richmond, they'll offer you bottled water, and they somehow think that it's a better product somehow than just what's coming out of the tap.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, that's something that we may be able to put into our educational package for students.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Yes, sorry, through the chair, I forgot one of my other questions. Just if staff could I know in the report there's pictures of staff in action and some of our infrastructure, but noise loggers, I don't really have a good visual of what a noise logger is. And it seems like a pretty vital tool. It was able to detect 131 non-visible underground leaks. Is that do we have enough of them, or are they getting out there and using their ability to detect these leaks on a expedited or on a regular, routinely basis? So a little comment on that, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the noise loggers are set up by map, section map, and each of the loggers go onto our water valve, and throughout the night they from one to the other, and then in the morning the staff would pick up any of the information that was received over the course.
Great, appreciate that. Thank you.
Further questions? So do I have a mover for the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Move, seconded. Call the question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carried. Item number 6, single-use bylaw, community engagement summary report and implementation plan. Suzanne, anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Councillor Au. Just one thing to note, there was some questions early on from the community relative to COVID-19 and potential transmission of COVID-19 when using reusable bags or reusable mugs. And I just wanted to highlight that earlier this month, the BC Centre for Disease Control did issue new guidance to just confirm that there has been no documented cases of transmission in that regard, and so therefore they have issued new guidance to business to indicate that they can now go back, because the risk is so low, they can go back to allowing reusable bags, having their staff fill the bags for residents, and using reusable mugs and reusable containers. So that's been helpful in terms of clarifying the safety around that for the public.
Yes, that's really good. So any questions? Michael?
Thank you, and that's a really positive update to hear. Thank you for sharing. My first question, I have a few different areas here. I really appreciate the acknowledgement of the resurgence in the single use of plastics as a result of the pandemic. On page 110, it basically simplifies what the city of Richmond's plan bylaw will include, which is a ban on foam cups, containers, plastic straws, and checkout bags. Looking further in the report on page 159, what other municipalities are doing, and kind of wondering if the trend is going that way, and if staff feels that way, then maybe we should include a few more things in there now, so they're part of what we're unfolding. Or maybe staff's plan is to lump some of these into a phase 2 kind of approach. So what I picked up from what other municipalities had, which I clearly see as an issue in Richmond as well, is having a fee for disposable cups, having fee for paper and reusable bags, and also requiring 40% recycled content for paper bags with labeling requirements. So where's staff's stance on bringing those initiatives in?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, our stance is that we don't recommend that out of the gate. What we suggest is that we get the bylaw implemented because it is a fairly substantial change with targeting 3 key products at the same time. And then what we wanted to do was monitor the success of the program, and then we could always cycle back and propose some additional restrictions if we felt it was necessary. So to be least invasive, give industry and business the opportunity to comply, and then come back if we felt that there were some additional requirements needed. In some cases, the requirement for the 40% content in paper bags has made it very difficult for business to source those products. We heard that from business when we did consultations, and as a result, it's driven up the price for that. So we are recommending that not at this time, but it could be an expansion of the program should we consider that that would be a good move to further expand the success of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. My next question through the chair to staff. Mentioning, this is a few different places, I guess the place where it mentions under financial impact of this report, on page 113, it has the funding amount of $563,800. My question is a little bit of a breakdown on that. Is that a one-time cost? Is that what's the longevity that funding will provide? I know in there it lists some things such as auxiliary staff, the rollout of the implementation, the communication, and consulting fees. How many auxiliary staff will that hire, and for how long? I wonder. And further to that, in the report it mentions, uses a good phrase, plastics action, which is what other jurisdictions, the action they can take. And I'm curious, on page 160, it says what provincial and federal plastics actions will be, but I don't think in there it mentions anything about them having enforcement staff or funding for municipal auxiliary staff to do the work. So I guess two-part question here. How long will that $500,000 go? And is the province having like a parallel system that will assist those auxiliary staff, or are our staff the only ones who will be doing that enforcement?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we expect that the $563,000 is what it will take to launch the bylaw. A lot of that funding includes preparation of the communication materials, but also outreach to business. It includes approximately 2 staff to help support the launch of that. And then what we want to do is see how the implementation goes, how much compliance that we get. And then what we would do is identify what we consider to be potentially the ongoing costs associated with the outreach to business as well as potential for enforcement. And then we would include that in future budgets as part of the utility budget.
And just a follow-up, do you know if there will be any provincial or federal enforcement staff that go out and do similar things that our auxiliary staff will be trained to do?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, that has not been raised. The province has not identified, nor have the federal government identified that they would be doing any enforcement at this stage. We are still early on in trying to conclude what the federal action is, how that's going to be implemented, and the province does seem to be happy to allow the local government to implement and enforce on their own.
Great, appreciate that. Thanks. Keep up the good work.
Harold?
Yeah, I've got a question on this one that really concerns me. I don't see plastic plates and utensils on the list. Is that in there anywhere, or when's that coming?
Through the chair to Councillor Steeves, the bylaw does not include those items at this time. It includes just the bags, the straws, and the takeout containers. Any additional items such as utensils would be the subject of a future potential amendment.
Okay, I'm not on the committee, but I'd certainly like to see a referral on that one. Probably the most important thing for Richmond to ban is the plates and knives and forks and spoons. They are one of the reasons that for the decline in the fishing industry. Now, it's a little bit convoluted, but I was the secretary of the Forestry and Fisheries Committee, which constituted the Ministry of Environment way back in 1973. And we did a study of the decline, the coming decline of the fishing industry, and we banned the cutting of the alder trees all the way through the forests of BC. And the best way to replace the plastic dishes is with alder. You can get all kinds of plastic plates, plastic knives, forks, and spoons. Instead of that, the forestry, after we got turfed out, they went back to spraying the forests to kill the alder, and that is in large part what killed the fishery. And being as the fishing capital, I think it is important that we effectively ban the plastic utensils and require that anything that takes their place would be disposable alder. There's a couple of companies that are trying to break into the market with great difficulty. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Very good. I have a question for staff on PWT 111, Table 1, talking about the top priorities identified by the business. And they mentioned that they would like the city to host a trade show to connect local businesses with vendors who offer alternatives. I mean, are we prepared to do that?
Mr. Chair, we are looking at supporting business in any way that we can, and that is something we are looking at how we might be able to pull that together to support them. They want us to look to try to help them make the right decisions in terms of the products. So we are looking to try to be able to offer that when we can, associated with the province's, reopening plan associated with COVID-19.
Yes. Well, I think we may not have to host a trade show, right? But I think perhaps, we should try to provide information to help them to make the connection. And the second one is in the below, talking about communication and education to the public about the changes. So again, what is our plan to educate the public?
Mr. Chair, our main communication at this stage is with the business community, and to understand with them, we will be putting together an information toolkit, which includes various items that the business can use with the community. So that they are our main target group, but we will also be putting information on our website, reaching out to the public as we typically do through our standard means, using social media, and again, through our single-use website that we have.
Very good. So, Bill, you have a question?
Yeah, if I can, first of all, an outstanding report, Suzanne. Thank you very much for it. Keep up the good work on it. Just following up on the trade show, is this not something a group like the Chamber of Commerce could host? And we could have some partnerships involved in the community. They represent business, and obviously our relationship with the Chamber is extremely good. And it's, it's something that I think it would be worthwhile rather than the city bear it. Yeah, as Suzanne mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, that we are working with business, and this is a good chance to get appropriate businesses involved, especially those that are going to be affected by the most by this. And I think it'd be an opportunity for us to move forward, especially hopefully after level 4 is released and we can carry on and have people coming together. So anyhow, just suggest that. And it would be, just out of curiosity, coming back to the financial aspect, I think it's a great value for $500,000 and money well spent for what we've done and how we are doing things in Richmond. It would be nice to just quantify some of the, the people like, for example, at the workshop, we've added some staff. I don't know whether it's 1, 2, or 3. It's not the fact that we've added staff. It's how many it takes to run the workshop, and I support everything you've done there. But it would be nice to just have a little bit of more what I call quantitative on it, as you have down in the bottom paragraph on it. But anyhow, Mr. Chair, I'm not on the committee, but when it comes to council, I'll definitely be supporting this, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Very good. Michael, you have another question?
Yes, thank you. This is actually in relation to what Councillor Steves had mentioned there. So I guess my question is, staff, do we need a referral to get the next wave of plastics, especially plastic cups and plastic utensils and plastic plates on the list, or is that unnecessary?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, what staff are doing is we're monitoring the federal action in this regard as well. And the federal government is looking to add to Schedule 1 of the toxic substances developing regulations, which will include some of what we're doing today, but also cutlery, six-pack rings, and problematic plastics. So staff will initiate and bring that forward at the appropriate time. We do not require a referral. We will be cycling back to you when we feel the time is appropriate on those.
Great. I appreciate that, and thanks, Councillor Steves, for bringing that up. I just think of a lot of banquet halls that are about to start opening their doors again and serving cake and all that stuff from styrofoam. They switch to plastic, but we'll be using paper, or even better, something that can be reused every time. So anyhow, I appreciate the communication that goes out for that. Thanks.
Okay, so do I have a mover for the staff recommendation? Move, seconded. For the question, those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Okay, number 7, manager's report. Danny?
Mr. Chair, I have a quick one. Okay. Just wanted to give council or committee a quick update. In light of the recent fire at the Richmond Nature Park, staff are taking a look at the water supply system in the area, just to see what can be done to improve the ability for Richmond Fire Rescue to respond to any future fires in the Richmond Nature Park and the Nature Park East. If any significant upgrades are required, we'll be preparing a capital submission for Council's consideration as part of the 2022 capital budget process.
Okay. Any question on that? Any further reports from managers?
Mr. Chair, through you to committee, there is one more update from transportation. Implementation of 3 van accessible size parking stalls in Steveston Village was completed on July 14th.
Yes.
This work included upgrading of 2 existing on-street accessible stalls to make them wider to allow for the accessible vans. As well, the introduction of a new van accessible stall in one of the city lots on First Avenue was introduced by converting 2 regular stalls into a wider stall for vans as well. And these improvements were presented to committee in a staff report and endorsed by council earlier in April of this year.
Any questions or comments? No? Okay. Any further updates? If not, so Michael?
Yes, thank you. I thought maybe it would be a manager's report, but this is very fresh off the news. BCU is now in a state of emergency for wildfires. Do Public Works have any preparation needs as a result of that? I know we're not in any of the hit areas, but part of this emergency declaration is creating space for evacuation centers. So I'm not sure if water supply or anything, does Public Works are responding to this news at all today? And then I have one other short question.
Any response from staff?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, nothing specific, but our standard process is to have a staff on call regularly on standby so that we can prepare and respond to issues. And as Mr. Chan noted earlier, where we do think there are issues such as the Richmond Nature Park, we're looking proactively to look for where we can provide water supply to be able to address those issues. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Irving.
Thanks, Suzanne, and through the chair to Council Wolf. Yes, certainly we're cognizant of the emergency declaration, and any city response would be led through community safety. So certainly, we have sent firefighting crews prior to assist with some of those situations. But our more broad corporate response is always led through community safety and the emergency management group there as well. So they coordinate the response from Public Works and other areas as necessary.
Great, thank you. Through the chair, my final question area, different direction, and this has been brought up at community safety and will be brought up at Parks and Rec after this, but I just thought I'd bring it up to this committee as well. The need for more swim safety or no swimming signs. Is there a Public Works component to this that needs to be addressed as well? That's why I thought I'd bring it up here in case any of the managers or staff could respond in relation to transportation routes where people might be going to get in the water, or signage, which I think falls under Public Works.
Any staff comment? John?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I completely understood the question. So you're looking for signage around people trying to enter the water?
Around safety or telling people about the hazards of the Fraser River. So there's been a call for more of that, especially for some recent drownings, and statistics revealed about deaths in the Fraser River. So it's brought up at community safety, and I just thought, is there anything that Public Works staff could contribute to this before we discuss it at Parks?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we coordinate corporately across the board. More recently, we were looking at ways of limiting or preventing people from crossing over to Shady Island or Steveston Island. So in that regard, typically Parks and Community Services will be the lead in regards to helping assist and message to the public where things and activities may not be safe. But Public Works and Engineering certainly support. And in that case, we were looking at the placement of concrete barriers. So we would execute that with Parks and Community Services as the lead and identify what would be the appropriate solution or communication tool in various situations.
Great, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Bill, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on, Michael beat me to the punch. We said at community safety, we bring it up under Public Works and also Parks and Rec, about no swimming signs, and down in at Gary Point. I went down there again a couple of times in the last week. I think we need some very simple signs. There is signage there of no swimming, but there's too much writing on it. I think they need a swimmer on the sign with our old Target thing with no on it, and I think that is probably would be better than what we've got there. At least we have signs there. I'm not criticizing the fact that we have signs there. They're good, but I saw people with young children out in the water on the weekend, also down by the pillars. If a boat came along and had a swell, it would, the little children would sure know about it, and I'm not sure how the parents would react. We'd probably get letters again criticizing us. So I think it's something, and I'll bring it up on the Parks and Rec this afternoon. I think it's something we as a council need to look at, just to make sure that the appropriate signage is there for people. People are not going to read the signs that are there. They're good signs, but you got to stop and read them. And I happened to be down there on a bicycle, so I got off and I read them. But I think we need something a little more blunt and a little bit bigger as well. I believe they're probably a foot by 15 inches or whatever, and I think they could be a bit bigger than that. So anyhow, thank you, and thank you for allowing us to bring it up here. Thank you.
Yes, I think staff will follow up on that.
Yep.
Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, motion carry. The meeting adjourned. Stay on. Harold, now it's your turn.
But I might unmute myself here. Okay, I'll call the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Services Committee meeting to order. Would somebody like to move the minutes?
So moved.
All those in favor, contrary, carried. Next committee date, September the 28th, 4 p.m. And our first item is National Drowning Prevention Week, July 18th to 24th. And I think that just ties right into the conversation we just had in terms of signage along the river. So perhaps staff could introduce this item and maybe tell us what they consider they might be able to do regarding the signage.
Did we make a motion, Harold, to refer to the signage issue to staff to examine what we've got there and how many more signs we need along the water, not just for swimming, but for other activities along the waterfront?
Yeah, I think we should, but we should hear the staff on this report first, because this is what it's all about, but it's meant signage.
Good.
It mentions all the things we're doing to educate people on water safety, but I couldn't find anywhere in the report that we would give warnings to people that are swimming in the river. So,
okay.
Is this John Wogar?
Yes, thank you. I wanted just to highlight tonight that the City of Richmond's participating in National Drowning Prevention Week. We know that Canadians love to stay active by participating in water-related activities, including swimming, boating, and paddleboarding. I'm just going to wait for the slides to catch up here a little bit. So as I said, this is National Drowning Prevention Week, and it's a national initiative. And Canadians as well as Richmondites are like to stay active, participating in water-related activities. But unfortunately, water-related deaths happen far too often and too close to home. Just this past Saturday, a man drowned while camping at Chehalis Lake. He was 20 feet from shore. So far this year, there have been 27 drownings in BC. And a few facts about drowning in Canada. 400 people lose their lives each year to drowning. High-risk groups include children under 5 and men aged 18 to 49. The latter group, alcohol was involved in half of these incidents. And it's also the #1 cause of unintentional death in children under 9. 66% of drownings happen May to September. The overwhelming majority of those are 15 meters to shore. 92% of drownings with children under 5, supervision was absent or they were very distracted. And it's shocking that 12% of drownings happen in a bathtub. Some other facts about drowning. They're fast and silent. Drownings can happen in as little as 10 seconds, which really highlights the importance of supervision. 94% of youth who drowned were not wearing life jackets. And as a testament to the lifeguarding profession, only 1% of drownings actually happen in a lifeguard setting or setting supervised by a lifeguard. And I want to add that boomers are getting older, but not necessarily wiser. We've seen, over the last 5 years, we've seen a 20% increase in deaths in the last 5 years, and 90% of those were not wearing a life jacket. 64% of them were alone, and 51% of them consumed alcohol. So what were people doing when they drowned? Swimming is the most common activity, but 12% of people, they did not intend to be in the water. They were walking, they were running, or they were playing near the water. And when we look at the stats for BC, we see an increase in drowning accidents that happen while boating. And then looking at the major risk factors identified in drowning reports for the last few years, there's a few key themes or educational messages that were identified and that we're trying to impart to the public. One is that drowning is preventable. Even one is too many. Talked about supervision earlier. Watch me, not your phone. Always directly supervise children. If you are not within arm's reach, you have gone too far. Be smart and wear a life jacket. Choose it, use it. Always wear it in a boat. And learn to swim to survive. In many drownings, the victim never intended to go into the water. Could you survive an unexpected fall into the water? We want to practice open water safety and swim with a buddy. Make smart choices before you go into the water. Know your limits. Alcohol is a common factor in too many boating-related activities. Both alcohol and cannabis impair judgment, reflexes, and balance. Stay sober in and around the water. And be water smart all year round. You can save a life, yours and someone else's. Take a learn to swim, life-saving, or first aid class today. The City of Richmond plays an active role in the prevention of drowning. And these are some of the activities that we're doing, our action plan. On average, over 18,000 individuals participate in swimming lessons and learn water safety techniques each year. Participants range in age from toddlers to seniors. This vital life skill is one of the most important and effective strategies in preventing drowning. We just hired 25 new lifeguards for our pool, and the first thing I tell them is that teaching kids to swim is the most important thing that you will do. Advanced aquatic training. Richmond's a leader in providing training for 2,500 youth and young adults each year who learn to be a lifeguard or water safety instructor. A water safety program, a water safety school program, is in partnership with the Richmond School District that helps prepare elementary and high school students for outdoor education trips involving water. Swim to survive. It's estimated that only 50% of kids take swimming lessons across the country. This free program that we offer to our community, teach all ages the 3 minimum skills to survive an unexpected fall into the water. Roll into the water, tread water for 1 minute, and swim 50 meters. If you can do all 3 of those things, you have a much likelier chance of survival. And then finally, community education. Another important strategy in the prevention of accidental drowning. We teach water safety in all of our swimming lessons, and we provide important information to the public. So that concludes the formal part of my presentation. Before I open it up to questions, I'd like to pass along and introduce my colleague Todd Gross from Park. He's going to talk a little bit more about what we are doing on Richmond's waterfront parks to promote safety. Todd, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. So we've been on this topic for a while now, given what happened earlier this year at Garry Point Park and the wave activity. At that time, we did review our signage throughout our waterfront areas and felt that the signage was adequate, but was lacking in relevance to wave activity, boat activity. So at that time, we did do updates to our signage. Additionally, you know, we do have at our high use areas that are directly on the water, over the water, such as Imperial Landing, we do have additional educational information, signage, and buoys. And then in addition to that, we've also reviewed our messaging. So our messaging originally had the words beaches as opposed to waterfronts. We've recently changed and updated that on the city website so that people are clear, because some of the external websites or users were taking our information and marketing our areas as beaches and or ultimately swimming areas. We've made those adjustments and enhancements. And then lastly, we went out and did a review of Metro Vancouver, Lower Mainland municipalities to look at what messaging they're using, what processes, and we're consistent within the region. Further to what Councillor McNulty highlighted at the Public Works Committee, I think those are some good comments. You know, our messaging has been in place for a while. It is word-orientated, and I think given the diversity in our community, if we can use icons or images to perhaps reflect no swimming and what is required or what's not allowed, that may be helpful. So we will do a review of those signage and look at ways to improve them for sure.
Good stuff.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? I've got one, and that's in terms of Garry Point and the toddlers that Bill mentioned wading in the water. What have we got to warn people not to let their kids do that? Because one of those big waves comes in and that kid's washed it right into the river, and you don't last long.
So through the chair to committee, that particular location, we do have signs right there. That was also came forward through, I think, the newspaper last week, where a resident wrote in about that with concern. So perhaps it's maybe that the signs themselves are not legible, or maybe the language. So that's something that we can look at and review, not only maybe the messaging of the sign, but perhaps the placement.
Great. Okay, I'm not sure, my chart here doesn't give the particular order, so I'll start with Michael, who's at the top of my list.
Thank you. Through the chair and staff, I have questions that probably will go some to John, some to Todd. But anyhow, we'll get started. So thanks for the report, and the presentation was really valuable. Sometimes with a report like this, we'd have an attachment that would be a copy of a brochure or something that goes out to the public. Do we have Richmond-specific drowning prevention publications or pamphlets?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we have some materials that we would use, some posters, that sort of thing. We have some materials that part of our curriculum in swimming lesson programs. We've used some press releases that we try to educate the public using some of our own information, some of Life Saving Society information as well. Those are the typical methods. I'd be happy to share some of those with you.
Great, yeah, and follow up on that, then if we could just get them available to more in the public. I know I've I just have one of my old brochures here about saying wise choice, now wear it. But I think in all of our community centers, because we're surrounded by water, I think we need to take more responsibility to get publication out there in multiple languages as well. Next one, the report highlighted some numbers, but there was no graphs or stats beyond what was listed. So 2 questions on that. It says the average is 18,000 individuals take swimming lessons from toddlers to seniors. That's on average. Do we know how much COVID has taken a hit? I know my 2-year-old daughter has done like next to nothing when we thought that was going to be her big early recreational activity, is learn how to swim. So do we know what the numbers have dropped to? Are we like from 18,000 average to next to 0 now?
Through the chair, Councillor Wolf, we were still able to launch swimming lessons during COVID, and in fact, what happened was the parents actually had to participate in the water with their children. They dropped from up to 18,000 typical year to about 8,000 during COVID.
Okay, and then related through the chair to staff on the stats for the water safe, it mentions that they get summer camps as the main participants in the water safe program. Are there other sources of ways that that program can be expanded? I know you did mention that high school students get it as well. There's been a letter to the editor and to mayor and council recently from a Richmond teacher who was advocating for more education in PE classes. So is the city working with the school district in some regards to expand these programs? I know some of my students have had the Get Wet program to be part of outdoor ed, but if they're not in that program, they have no need to get the certification. So are we trying to perhaps make a goal where everybody gets some level of certification before graduation?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we would love the opportunity to work more with the school board on these initiatives. The water safe program used to be called Get Wet, so we just kind of we worked with the school board to revamp the program, target it to more of their specific needs and what they were asking us. We would certainly be willing to do more with them, whatever their needs would be.
Great, that's really positive to hear. I didn't know the name change either, so thanks for that. And perhaps Councillor Lou, who's not on the call, could bring that up at the next school district city liaison meeting to further that work. That's great. Final 2 questions in this area. VHF radios. I know I just purchased one to monitor Channel 16. Went out on a boat to help to find if there's any boating disasters or potential drowning events. Beyond Coast Guard, do any city staff or Richmond RCMP monitor radio calls, or is that left to Coast Guard? This might not be someone at this meeting who knows that one.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'm not sure of anyone that does that. I would assume maybe fire rescue might do some of that, or police, but I'm thinking that'd be more Coast Guard orientated. We can look into that though.
Okay, thanks. And then my final question, which probably goes to Todd, to the chair to Todd, would be, you mentioned some of the reviews that have gone on related to areas where drowning could occur. But I'm thinking of some recent drownings that have occurred. One along the Middle Arm where someone was retrieving a football and drowned, and then probably more than 5 years ago over by Triangle Beach. So these are areas where typically people aren't going in the water. There's no real boat launch. But do we overlap where drownings have occurred and put signage in those locations as a means to try and not let history repeat itself in that regard?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, our focus obviously is where we have the highest usage. Some of these locations that you mentioned are very passive in nature, very low activity, and somewhat unmanaged or unmaintained. So as part of this process, as I highlighted, we're really trying to look at some of our education pieces and see if we can get the messaging out through our website, social media, and then look at some of these areas that perhaps maybe we can do a better job of either having additional signs or how the sign is referenced.
Okay, great. Then my final question through the chair: is there any staff on here who also attend the city school district liaison meetings who could ensure that that's? Oh, okay, thanks. If you could ensure that it's brought up a further discussion on education and certification, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Andy.
Thank you, through the chair. So, first of all, excellent presentation, because you covered a lot of information that actually I was going to think about or comment on. So this is more of a comment, and I don't want to be too much of an outlier here, but I will say signs have limited usage. And so there is a tipping point and a balance to try and be achieved. Clearly, some signs are important in some places, and you will look at that because that's what you're doing. But I just would caution against anybody thinking that signs in any scenario are going to actually solve every issue. And I'm not saying anybody is saying that. There's all kinds of examples. Speed signs, obviously, would be one classic example. So you've already touched on it. I just want to emphasize the importance of working with stakeholders and partners on this issue. It's very serious. Any one drowning is a tragedy and too many, and most, if not all, are entirely preventable. And you've already touched on a lot of those things. So the problem is it recycles. You can't just do your education and do your coordinating with other stakeholders, whether it's a school board, which is an important one, or whether it's RCM STAR, the search and rescue, or the Coast Guard, or both, or the police or fire, and be done with it. Because it has to occur every year with the same full vigor that it occurred at its best moment. Because we always have a new crop of youngsters coming up, of people moving in who aren't familiar with the river, people building their pool for the first time ever. Bathtubs were mentioned. So my comment is along that line. Signs, yes, helpful, necessary, and effective in some places, but also with limited effectiveness in others. So it is a comprehensive approach, and you've already talked about it, so I know you're already looking at that, but I think that is the way to go. It's got to be coordinated. Councillor Wolf just talked about the school board. That's correct. Search and rescue, the volunteer group that works with the Coast Guard. Swim clubs, not just city swim lessons, but swim clubs are effective. Because anybody who's even a strong swimmer is probably even more aware of the fact you don't go in the river if you don't have to. So that is just something, I think that is actually the more effective, comprehensive, long-range, continual, repetitive, every year way to go. Stakeholders, partners, education, education, education. Signage is important, yes. And the other aspect to it is kind of appropriate enforcement from time to time. Whether it's a bylaw officer reminding people that this is a no-swimming area, whether it's an RCMP member or some other member of the city, perhaps a firefighter, somebody in some position of authority occasionally having a look at Garry Point. You can profile what times and what days and what weather are likely to have people out in those areas. Probably not in the middle of November when you have 6 hours of daylight and it's pouring rain. So there are areas where you can pay more attention. That's part of the education process and part of making it all effective. I just think it's comprehensive. You talked about it. Your presentation covered it. I thought it was very good. And I just don't want to be thinking that if we put up signs, we're done with it. It's continual. It's hard work, and it has to be done over and over again. And thank you for the report and the presentation.
Okay, I've got a couple of comments to make as well. Kids of my generation learned to swim in the river. I learned to swim off Gilbert Beach and also at Scotch Pond at the Hole in the Wall. And that's the reason we have the Steveston Pool, because we knew how bad those currents were. I got caught in the current once, and it's pretty scary. So I think that it's important that we follow through on these proposals we're talking about here. But I do have one other I'd like to raise. and that's the Parks Afloat plan that we came up with about 25 years ago. And the reason for that is that we off of Sturgeon Banks and Scotch Pond, if you get out, don't go into the hole-in-the-wall channel by the river, but it's the calmest water in the world for teaching kids how to row a canoe or a kayak with life jackets, of course. And in 1982, we planned what we called an estuarium or a marine nature house, which would have had aquariums to teach about the foreshore animals and birds and the fishes in the river, but also would have canoes and kayaks that they could go out of Scotch Pond and be trained into safe boating. We started that program actually at Britannia right after Mary Gazettis had canoes and kayaks at Britannia, but when she left us in 2000 or 2002, it was discontinued. I'm going to bring this back as a referral sometime, probably in September, because I want to get it back on track before I retire. But I think it was a very important program, and I think this presentation today tells us how important that is. We're surrounded by water. The Sturgeon Banks, by the way, at high tide is only 1 meter to 2 meters deep, depending on the tide. It's nice and warm, and there's no currents. It's probably the best place in the world it is to learn water safety if you're in a boat. So I'll be bringing that one later on, and I thank staff for putting this together, and so I would ask now for a motion. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. Okay, next item. Community service, nonprofit organization, wellness check. Donna Lee.
Hi there. I have nothing more to add to the report. However, since I don't present to the PRCS committee very often, I thought I'd introduce myself. My name's Donna Lee. I'm a research planner with the Community Services Division, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Hey, well, welcome aboard. Any questions from anybody? Andy.
He was waving.
Sorry to the chair. That was just a wave hello.
Okay. Bill.
Yeah, well, I'll just wave back to Andy. Okay, Donna Lee, thank you very much for doing this. I think it was important to get a read and to get the stats. RCSAC does not have a meeting now until September to hear further from them and an opportunity to on it. And I'm quite happy to have the data in front of us. And obviously, the pandemic has affected everybody, but at least we have some opportunity to get feedback. And I know everybody, I just got another email while we're having a meeting asking me to come to talk about how we could help them fund in these and fundraise in these difficult times. So it was a good chance to, when I look at, we had 26 organizations. I think it's very important that we have that. Things aren't perfect. They could probably be worse, but people are struggling, and the nice thing with our nonprofits are they're continuing to follow their mandates and service the people of Richmond, of which they've organized for. So I thank staff, and I thank the organizations for all the good work they do. Thank you.
Okay, Jack.
Yes, thank you for the very good report, and I'm glad to know that most of the agencies are cautiously positive. I think that's very good news. And I definitely agree with the recommendation that we have to do another wellness check in 9 to 12 months. I think that's what we should do. Thank you very much.
Linda.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Well, thank you very much for the report. And I know this, was a council direction that we check in, but I'm wondering if this report could perhaps go to the RCSAC. And, I'm looking at on our page 16, the employee and volunteer wellness, and when I read that, some of the smaller organizations reported they don't have the tools or resources to support staff and volunteers. Perhaps there's a way that some of the larger organizations, in that roundtable, there's a lot of really great organizations who, as part of their mandate, offer you know, to work with other organizations or have programs in place that they could, you know, just hand over to other organizations. I think it might be a good place to have this discussion. I don't know what Councillor McNulty thinks. You're the liaison.
I will be bringing it up in September.
Okay, thanks.
I'm meeting staff next week, this week, and we'll be talking about it. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, anybody else? Would somebody like to move the motion?
So moved.
All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. Next item, Community Environmental Enhancement Grants Program. Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we don't have anything to add to the report. It's a direct response to the committee referral back in February. So staff is here to happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great list. Michael.
Thanks. You're through the chair to staff. I'm just going to speak in support of option number 1, which is staff recommendation to establish an environmental grant that complements the program. Reason for support for that option is hearing from organizations in the past that have hesitated finding a place in the existing program for them to apply, and also having this as a separate area so as to not water down some of the other ones. So if there are organizations or individuals who are keen for a certain area, they shouldn't have to try and pick off so many boxes in other areas that are not as relevant to them. So I think option 1 provides the best. I also feel that the funding allocation, I don't know what COVID will bring this fall or even next year, but I would assume it would be a slower uptake into this program, so that the financial impact here of not exceeding $35,000. I would assume that's not going to be a big issue because many organizations or community groups have really taken a hit right now and not being able to gather together beyond family units. So I think the shoreline cleanups, the invasive species removal, the planting events, of which I have lots of experience with in previous positions I was at. But also I know that, as mentioned in the report, our existing program of Partners for Beautification has done a great job. I remember when I adopted a trail in Richmond, being given garbage pickup tools, being given buckets, being given canvas bags to carry all these things in. So they've definitely been able to provide those kind of hands-on equipment. But what I think this grant will allow for is, like is mentioned in the report on page 24, things such as getting materials that do cost a bit, like renting a truck, associated with buying and securing some equipment, be they live plants or soil deposition and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm all in support, and after discussion, I'd make that motion option 1 if no one gets there first. Thanks.
Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Well, a good report. Thank you very much for doing this. A good job, and I think it's an area we've got to fund. A couple of questions. On our page 2720, we only have 12 organizations. Does that mean these are the only ones that can apply for the grant, or are there other organizations like some of these after-school groups or other community groups, church groups that do something along with the environment? Have we limited it only to these 12? Whoever can answer that? Maybe I make my comments. I hope we haven't, but somebody can answer that. The other thing, I agree with putting them in the same level as the grants. I will support option 1, but one of the things I'd like to suggest at this time, and it'll be coming up, I don't want to see the money for the environmental grants come from any of the other groups where we're cutting back on $35,000, et cetera, to give them money. I think we should look at increasing the total budget of the grants by $35,000 or $50,000. I'm not sure. Maybe we have to go to Jerry Chong for this, but I think we should increase the amounts in the grants as opposed to trying to fit another group in with the same amount of money. I don't know if that was envisioned here, but the money that we have used in past has come from casinos. And obviously they're going to be back, et cetera. And I'm not going to say we're going to be flush or anything like that, but I think we should look to expanding the total pot and making sure that everybody else gets their due diligence. Some of the, I always say with regard to grants are just that. They are a grant and a help, but some organizations literally live off the grant and wouldn't survive without the grant. So I don't want to see anybody hurt along that way. So I will support what's on the floor. I think we have room to grow. It's just a matter of how we do it, but we've got hopefully option one in now, and we can look to modify as we go along. I assume the forms will go out in, what will it be, this October, or whatever, for the grants to be adjudicated, and at that time, hopefully, we can have a look at what funds we may have available. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Manotti, the list that you referred to, I think it's on PRCS 27 and 28. Those 12 names are only meant to outline the current programs that relate to environmental initiatives. The applications are open for others as well. So that's hopefully that answers that question. And second is the currently stated $35,000 because this is a new program. So we really need to observe and see how the application comes in through the year. Once we got the final application collected, we'll actually seek council direction as well.
Okay, thank you. Andy.
Thank you, and through the chair. Just one comment that I found interesting in a question just about these, and it's an important part of the environment, as we all know. And so the inclusion of it seems to be about beautification, which obviously is good for bees if it's the right kind of plants. But my question is there any group that actually does beekeeping? For instance, in some places in Vancouver, they've got rooftops that they do it in. Is there anywhere in Richmond that does that, or are we looking at promoting actual beekeeping for the bee population in addition to the beautification that seems to be mentioned on page 27? Thanks.
Does anybody know that answer?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, we do currently work with a few community groups, including Urban Bounty, to incorporate some beekeeping into our city parks around our community garden areas. We also liaise with other nonprofit groups who do beekeeping as well for education purposes as well.
Okay, and I know one group that's, if I can, just one quick comment, one group that's quite active in it are the farmers, actually. And if you go out there and walk on the dike, you got to be, there are dikes between the cranberry fields, you got to be careful because they will import bees at certain times during the season to help with pollination. So they might have some ideas on that too. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, you want to move a motion?
Yes, I thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to move option 1, which is the staff recommendation for community environmental enhancement grant programs.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Contrary? Carry. Okay, next item, community gardens referral, and that's Jason again. And I believe we have people from, and I can't remember the new name, the Food Security Society to answer questions as well. So Jason, would you like to introduce your report?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff is here to present this report as a direct response to the referral received from committee last month. While we don't have anything to add to the report, staff would like to seek endorsement, perhaps after the meeting from committee, to start a community-wide public consultation process for the listed community garden sites, so that we can hear from the broader community. As you mentioned, we also have here today with us Mr. Ian Lai, as well as Ms. Serena Clay-Smith, representing Urban Bounty, formerly known as Richmond Food Security Society, to answer any questions you may have regarding the day-to-day administration and upkeeping of the gardens. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, first I'll entertain any questions committee, and then we do have a delegation from the people who live next to the railway right of way. So any questions from committee? I don't see any hands up. Royden Lamb and Pedro Villafan. Are you here? Do we have Royden Lamb here? I don't see them on my screen.
Mr. Chair, Royden Lamb is here. I can see them, and I'll ask clerks to turn off their mute. I think that may be the problem.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can hear me? Great, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
At the last meeting, we were present to discuss the proposed community gardens behind our property and just south of Branscombe House. It was deferred, and I'm just curious, we're all curious what the status of this is and where we're at with it. I sent an email to most of the council members today with some photographs, and I'm just curious, we just need to know if we've made some progress with this decision as to whether it's going to be located here or perhaps somewhere else.
And there were two people, another person, Pedro?
Yes, hello.
Yeah.
You're muted, Pedro. Pedro, you're muted.
Thank you. I think Royden summed it up. We just want to catch up with you guys and see what the condition was from the team, and we can go from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, committee, basically this is a report for information. Does anybody from committee have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I want to make a comment.
Okay, Bill.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a comment and on it because I understand that I may have offended a number of people of Gardens of Moncton Street when I was referring to a situation in the past where city staff had to be involved in it. And for that, I'm going to apologize to those gardeners in the Moncton Street. I continue to be a good supporter of community gardens. But I have a question to staff. What if a group in a community doesn't want the gardens close by or adjacent to their complex, etc.? What is our communication process and how do we resolve it?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, we would go through it like all the other public consultation process. We would discuss the issues with the group, discuss the proposed plan, proposed details, and then listen to what they have to say. If the issue is critical, we would bring it to SMT's decision as well as to council and seek council direction on the issue.
I know we need community gardens, but I want to make sure we have a formal protest or process, because it is council that ends up having to answer, council members have to answer if the community is not happy. Okay, and I really feel that that's very, very key in terms of communication with the public, but also with council and the public. We take the brunt of every action that the city makes in the city if people are unhappy. And I want to make sure, for example, these folks that have come and made a delegation, they don't want the garden, or majority of them, or whatever, in their backyard, so to speak. I hope that we'll have a process that we can work with them, say, okay, maybe we can move the garden elsewhere, etc. So I just want to make sure that for the record that's there, because I appreciate where we have the community garden. As a matter of fact, I thank you for the report. We should, no disrespect, but I wish we had all of this stuff months ago on it and at the beginning of the season. This is good material. Some of it I wasn't aware of, and I think it's well laid out, and it's good to have. So I just want to make that point. along the way. So I'm hoping you're working with this delegation, hopefully, and to come to a resolution that will satisfy everybody in their neighborhood. So thank you for that.
Okay, Linda. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Thank you for the report. So can you just let me know where we are right now? So the report, the recommendation in the package is to receive this information. So if nothing is done, what is the process now? If nothing else, if staff has not given any other direction, what's the process now?
Through the chair to Councillor Mathieu, if after this meeting, if the direction is satisfied by all committee members, we would actually go and start preparing for public consultation. That is mainly will be performed through the means as outlined on PRCS 40. So that will take basically the next 2 to 4 weeks into approximately mid-August. Once that preparation is done, we would actually start the public consultation process to the wider community, because as you can see in the attachment maps in the report, there's a wide demand in terms of wait lists, and the demands came from a lot of locations throughout the city of Richmond. Once the public consultation process is concluded, we would do analysis as well as bring a report to council later in the year. Once that is endorsed, we will start construction on the sites. And that is not necessarily the site as noted. We would have to wait until the result coming back from the public consultation process.
So to be clear, the public consultation process is around the 4 sites that are identified on PRCS 1, is that correct?
That is correct.
Pardon me?
That is correct, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up, Mr. Chair. So further down on PRCS 41, under the comparable railway greenway corridor site options, it says staff have identified a number of sites beyond the Branscombe House site. And look at those locations and develop a public consultation process to gain resident feedback for these alternative sites. I mean, I think it would be a good idea to enlarge the public consultation area along the railway greenway. It could be north or south of Branscombe. Have you thought of that?
Through the chair to Councillor Mathieu, that is exactly what we plan to do with the upcoming public consultation.
Thank you.
Can I ask some?
We're into the council discussion now. You can listen in, but you can't add in. Carol.
Thank you very much, through the chair. So I'm looking at the report, and on page 40, it states that a list of current planned sites, Gilbert, Riverport, King George, Terra Nova, Greenway, Gardenway, Railway. So obviously the Branscombe area is not on this list. So I'm assuming and then that it's not going to happen, certainly in the near future. And then on page 41, we list the following sites are currently planned for construction in 2021. So that's right now. 200 plots in Garden City lands, 15 on Railway south of Moncton, 20 in Cook School Park, 25 on Railway Greenway. So is it safe to tell these folks, the delegations that are here today, that nothing is happening this year or potentially next year, and that that particular site is off the list?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, as we said, we have to go through the public consultation process in upcoming months before we decide on the site in terms of the final location. However, on the list that you've mentioned on PRCS 40, in the paragraph we've identified a number of other sites. Those sites were so-called in the back burner. Those are sites that are possible in our previous analysis of potential locations. These are not a priority site for 2021. So what you're referring to in the table in PRCS 41 that is our priority in terms of constructing the gardens within this year.
Okay, so
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I'd like to add as well is, as we said in the report, there is different levels of approval and or priority for our gardens. So on that list, Garden City Lands is already an approved location. We're just waiting for our ALC approval. Cook was already established last year. We're just expanding that one. So some of these obviously will go ahead. The other ones, we haven't done the public consultation process. So that is still the bigger piece that we have to then come back and seek direction.
okay, so nothing's happening for the next year and a half, and that gives them plenty of time to let us know what their wishes are, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, no, we are doing the public consultation between now and this fall. Once we come back, depending on where that feedback takes us in council direction, we may be starting construction on some of these sites later this fall.
All right, thank you.
Michael. Thank you. Just a comment and then a question. On our page 40, it does mention a number of those sites at the bottom as in the list for currently planned sites. And I guess I'm surprised and not surprised that there's some expansion projects included in there before new garden sites. And I think one of the aspects of community gardens is it's close to home. You can walk there. As opposed to expanding and making one really big one, you decentralize this type of feature. So that's just a comment. My opinion that it's something we should try and reach out to more areas as opposed to densifying so much in one space. And I do appreciate the map included as an attachment 1, I think, which shows where people live that are interested in community gardens. So it shows where the walking route waitlist people are. And I know it doesn't highlight areas much in East Richmond or Hamilton, but I know I've heard a lot more from people other than the few listed on this map. So perhaps other methods of reaching out to people. Anyhow, my question is for Ian Lai, who I think is waiting, available to answer questions. And the last time this was brought up, there was a comment about that when a community gardens comes in and area is destroyed, and I took a bit more thinking about that, and I do understand that some activities that people do in areas cannot happen after a community garden goes in. But can Mr. Lai, who's available here, speak to some of the things that are added to the community that that reverse that statement of destroying it? But what does it give life to? What does it bring to a community? Because you've probably seen more created community gardens than anyone I know. So.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf, for the chair. I can answer that question in terms of community gardens broke around a whole social aspect.
Can't hear him.
Yeah, you're not loud enough.
Can't hear him.
Can't hear.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Better.
Okay, I'll come closer here. Community gardens bring around a whole social aspect to a community. It doesn't matter if you're a gardener or not. When you're passing through or passing by a community garden, there's this sense of beauty, there's the aesthetics around that. Gardens also provide forage for a lot of the pollinators, and we know that 1/3 of all our food requires some type of pollination. This is why we deal with bees in community gardens as well. And there's this concentration of energy that when you are a community gardener, you actually don't get much work done because you're stopping and chatting to people. Heaven forbid that we talk to our neighbors. That's something that it's a long lost skill, and sometimes you don't even need to speak the language other than pointing and gesticulating, and you can actually share some of what you grow with people that come by. I know in a lot of the community gardens that we have, people will come by and they'll come back to their car with zucchinis and vegetables, and I know they're not community gardeners. It's because they've stopped and they've had a conversation with their neighbor, and their neighbor has an excess of food, and they've shared their bounty. So I think community gardens provide that aspect to it. Yes, you can bring back some of that space, but all our community gardens, most of them, are very active right through into the winter. There's this thing that we do, it's called winter gardening or overwinter gardening, where the garden does not go into disarray. A lot of crops can be planted in October, and they're pretty much mature before winter hits, and those gardens add a beauty to the barren landscape that would otherwise be just grass. So I think community gardens are a really good way to incorporate the aesthetics and the beauty and the nature and the camaraderie that a community requires in order for it to be healthy and ties in with the wellness plan of the city.
While you're there, I've got a question as well. We had the same debate over the community garden on Moncton Street, south of Moncton Street, and the neighbors across the street were opposed. In fact, we put the fence up at their request, but they weren't happy with the deal. But I haven't heard a complaint since. So how has that worked out? Because we got a lot of community support for it as well.
Right. So at the Moncton site, we haven't had much complaint. I haven't heard anything from our open manager around neighbors complaining. I do believe that buffer zone is important. So in terms of Branscombe area, buffer zone is, I would suggest that there is a buffer zone just to give that a little bit of space between the neighbors and the gardens. We have had some issues at the Moncton site. I know at the one end where it may have been a little bit messy, I believe that was part of the school garden. Without any clear documentation, I cannot comment on that site being specifically a pigsty. But we have gone through and inspected it when it was part of the Tomakichi Homa School Garden. They had a mud garden. They had pots and pans. But again, like I'm saying, without that visual evidence, I can't say that that was what triggered people to say that it was a little bit of a mess.
Okay, I think at the time we put the fence up on the east side, and we put a new walkway down the west side. Everyone was quite happy with it. Okay,
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm still very confused about our process. Correct me if I'm wrong. I understand we're not going to do anything till we do the total consultation. Then I heard Mr. Gross say, well, we may start building something this fall. Are we going to have the consultation totally done throughout the community and all aspects of the community by the fall? And then what is the process? I guess my question will be, or my request, and that I have the motion, before anything is done, did it come back to council with the information and council approve those decisions, in that we're going to have to deal with it positive or negatively, okay? And not everybody is going to be in favor or not. And it's unfortunate that we have left a delegation not knowing whether they should come and protest more, make sure they're part of the consultation, et cetera. You know, I believe in community gardens, but I believe, as you say, we did have, and I referred to it before, we did have some issues with some of the community gardens, okay? And we have some information, but I'm not sure, I have a conflicting process here. So, can somebody clarify that one more time so we know? And then I'm going to make a motion.
Unless I'm wrong, as I understand it from staff, they're going to go through the consultation process.
Correct.
This neighborhood will be consulted. The neighbors across the street will be consulted. And the neighborhood in general would be consulted. Is that correct? In other words, it wouldn't be just one group being consulted, but it would be people that want gardens that live in the neighborhood, people that don't want gardens that live in the neighborhood.
but we're not going to build before we do the consultation. And council is going to receive the results of that consultation before we build, correct?
To the chair, to Councillor McNulty, that is correct.
That's not what was said earlier. Thank you very much for the clarification. Okay, and it will come back to council, correct? Or committee, and then council.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Okay, would somebody like to move, receive the report? Those in favor? Contrary, carried. Manager's report, and I posed a number of questions for the manager to go through as well. So hopefully we're having a long meeting. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a couple, starting with Rebecca Clark.
Hello, through the chair to the committee. I have a report on a couple of items. The Britannia Shipyard Society is actively working on developing the dock management plan. They have a draft together and we'll be reviewing it over the next couple of weeks, and we hope to have something established there soon. And we have also reached out to the owner of the Chinese junk to invite them to have a presence at Britannia on an ongoing basis, as well as at the Richmond Maritime Festival, and are awaiting a response from that person.
Okay, and one of the other questions I asked was about Port Townsend. It's operative this year, and has anybody looked into sending a delegation down if we can go through the border?
My director, Marie Fenwick, will take that question.
Yes, thank you. Given the evolving restrictions around travel, this would be a challenging year to get down to the festival, but we can discuss staff attendance with the CAO and respond in a memo. And certainly committee could make a recommendation that travel be approved for councillors should this type of travel be permitted and able to occur safely and within the COVID-19 restrictions.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I know that the Providence is listed to go down there, and so is the Gakumi. So we've got two vessels that are local vessels that they're expecting to go across the border with their boats. So if they can't go across the border, they wouldn't be attending either, I would assume. Okay, thanks for that. So would it require us to make a referral to approve staff and approve council members attending the way we did 2 years ago at this meeting now?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and then we can confirm the details later, but the council travel would require a resolution.
Good. Okay, Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get an update on the heat wave. I know that staff have, gotten together and talked about some of the issues that were experienced. I know many of us received correspondence from members of the public looking for things like cooling centers and, et cetera. So just wondering if there's an update from staff, and I'm sure you're reviewing about, what happened and things we've learned and what we could do differently. And I was listening to a meteorologist who said that the heat dome was a 1 in a 1,000 year event, but going forward, they're going to be happening more often, and they're already saying that July is one of the hottest on record, and, anyways. Thank you. If we could have an update from staff.
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, I'll maybe start, and then some of our other staff may have a few things to add. And certainly, we can always learn and do better as we experience these unprecedented emergencies, and we have gotten together as staff and also with our emergency services and with Vancouver Coastal Health to debrief. We did find that we had put many measures in place to support the community through the pandemic, and that was shared with members of council. We will be looking at using the term cooling centers more specifically in the future, as that seems to be language that helps the community know best where to go. Although we did find that opening the libraries as spaces, providing additional time for pools, having tents in parks were things that other communities were doing and calling cooling centers. So we feel like, while they weren't called that, we're meeting the needs for that purpose. Further to that, we are aware that there may be some funding available through Emergency Management BC, and we are looking to access that funding in the future should we need to put in place these cooling center concepts. And Elizabeth, Marie, or Todd, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add is that we're also working closely with corporate communications to have a ready-to-go communication plan, both internally to make sure staff are well aware of where to refer people, as well as externally. So we're busy working on that as well.
Thank you for that. And I think you raised a really interesting point about language, especially, cooling centers and what that actually means. And I think it goes, to the importance of having a communications plan and that community outreach so that when this happens again, which is going to happen again, we're all using the same language. And just wondering, are you working with the community association, like the presidents? Might be a good topic to bring to one of their monthly meetings, because I know I've heard that they fielded a lot of calls, like, why aren't you open? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McPhail. Certainly we will be working with them, and I should have also mentioned the social service agencies in the community, as they are always a good way to reach vulnerable people, so working with them on the communication strategy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I just have 3 points. One is what related to Councillor McPhail's last comment. Then I'll go back to yours about the motion for councillors to go to Port Townsend, and then I have a third one about dog parks. So just to follow up with Councillor McPhail's train there, I know at previous city events we've had these drinking water stations. They're like carts that we wheel in, and people have taps, so you don't need the underground infrastructure to get water. Have we been using these at all during the pandemic?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, apologies. No, I'm not certain if we did place them around the community, but certainly that's another piece that we could look at. We did, as I think you discussed at Public Works, have the drinking water fountain map out and publicized in a variety of different ways so people knew where to access those. And we could look at those stations further. There may have been some COVID-related reasons we didn't do it in this time. Yeah.
Great, then. Thank you, through the chair. Just I appreciate using all the tools we have available when suitable. That's great. Going back to the item that Councillor Steeves raised, I don't have the exact wording, but I'd put forward that motion to approve, as we did a previous time, to send staff and council team to Port Townsend, if we needed that motion today.
Yes, moved, and I'll second that. Chuck Allen and I went last time. I'd be very happy if somebody took my place. I think it's worthwhile because we were able to go and talk to all the boat owners, and eventually, when we get our waterfront operative, literally there's something like 10,000 people that voters that go to that Wood Boat Festival every year, and most of them travel the Salish Sea all the way up to Alaska, but they don't stop in here. And once we've got our wharf set up so we can take boaters, there's a good chance that we'll bring boaters into our community that have never been here. But we've got a lot to see, let's put it that way. And I think it should be a destination place on their charts. The second aspect of it is as well, this is also how we recruit the boats like the Kikumi to come here and take part in the Maritime Festival. So I'm hoping that we can get that referral passed. And different councillors should go down each time. Basically what I did, I went around, and I think Jack went around to some of the boats too. Every year I've gone and talked to just about every boat that's been tied up there. And I've got to know them all. And we found out there's a huge number of Canadian boats that go there, but they don't come to any place in Canada. And the Kikumi is actually one of them. And so I think it's important that we make those contacts, that we've got a wooden boat festival, albeit it's called the Maritime Festival. It's the same idea. And that's probably the best place to go to recruit festivals. Okay, any other comments on that? Yeah, Jack.
Yeah, I just want to mention that it's worthwhile to send staff and councillors down to pot Tonsan for the festival. And actually, at that time, last time, Councillor Hobbs was also there, but he was there for, a different capacity. But I think he must have also a very positive experience. So I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, Andy, that was thumbs up. Did you want to say something, or just say thumbs up?
Mr. Chair, if maybe I could suggest or clarify Councillor Wolf's motion, there's no need for council to approve staff going. That will be approved through the administration and by the CAO, and I know that he will support staff going as a part of the delegation. But so your motion might be specific to approving 2 councillors and naming them, provided that they are able to COVID restrictions permit and they are able to travel safely. Something like that. A bit on the fly, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd amend it to that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, all those in favor? Contrary? Michael, you said you had one more item.
Yes, thank you. My last one was related to dog parks, and I brought this up at community safety at the last meeting about bylaws and infractions and stuff. And then I got a response with the link to take, I think it went to mayor and council, all of our emails, to go to the dogs in parks aspect of our richmond.ca website. And then just looking through that list, I noticed that there was one temporary dog park that was listed. Some were listed as new, but there's one listed as temporary at Elmbridge Way and Alderbridge Way. My question is 2 parts. What was the cost of putting in a temporary dog park? And could we put temporary dog parks in other areas where there's a lot of community kind of upheaval about not having access to places where they can walk to get their dog? One such example that's come up again and again to me, I'm sure I'll hear about it more at Hamilton Community Community Society or Association, rather, is that in McLean Park in Hamilton, a lot of dogs or people with dogs are now going into the lacrosse box or the little hockey court there because it's one place that's caged and they can take their dog off leash. Albeit it's small and it's caged, but people will use it because it's caged. So could we not look to put in more temporary dog parks? And if the cost is reasonable, then I think we should make a motion today.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, would have to get back to you with that cost on what that is in today's dollars. It does depend on obviously the size of the park, the fencing, etc. Most of the temporary ones, the true temporary ones, are just wire construction fencing. And as part of our 2021 capital, we're actually going through a number of these so-called temporary parks and making them permanent at this time. Obviously, we'd have to find out where there is a need, some public consultation process in this as well, to find out proximity, demand, etc. But we can definitely bring back some costs to you to give some understanding as to what that would look like.
Thank you, Ben. Just a follow-up to be clear here. So the cost will come back to us, but to enact public consultation so that we have the direct evidence of where to put the new ones next year, do we need to enact that with a motion, that committee, or is that going to be underway regardless?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, what we can do is we do have some parks identified for future dog off-leash areas. We can include that in a memo with the cost back to committee to give some clarity and then decide how we move forward from there.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much. That's all for me.
Okay, anything else? I guess it's time to adjourn. Yeah. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. And we have a brief closed agenda, so we could close the doors and the screen, I guess.
Move compliance in the agenda.